So, this week in the Sacred Gathering, we are going to be looking at Psalm 16 together. Psalm 16 is, like many a good poem, many a good song, deceptively simple. It's not that hard to get around, kind of get our heads around what is going on in this psalm, but there's so many interesting directions, there's so many implications for some of the claims in this psalm. So I thought rather than kind of me just talking endlessly about it as I do many a week, we may take it a little more meditatively. We may just see what God has for us. And so, in this recording, I'll read it a couple of times, and we can kind of listen for what's there. I'll share a few of my thoughts, but on Sunday, I'm looking forward to hearing where other people take it. What are some of the things that God is speaking to them through this psalm? So let me first start. I'm going to read two different versions of the psalm just to get different feels for it. This psalm is interesting in that it's got a lot of textural problems with it. There's a lot of obscure words that we're not quite sure of the meaning of, and so actually a lot of the kind of specific words and phrases is kind of guesswork these days. And so you're going to hear some kind of different takes on what it is the psalmist is trying to say. But I think the overall point of this psalm is very clear, and I think it has some very profound implications for us if we really, take this psalm to heart. So I'll first read it from the English Standard Version, which is a more modern translation, which does, I think, a very nice job with the Psalms and poetry sections, particularly. And then we'll take a look at what Eugene Peterson does with his kind of paraphrase of it in what's called the Message. Preserve me, O God, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord, and I have no good apart from you. As for the saints in the land, they are the excellent ones, in whom is all my delight. The sorrows of those who run after another God shall multiply. Their drink offerings of blood I will not pour out or take their names on my lips. The Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot. The lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Indeed, I have a beautiful inheritance. I bless the Lord who gives me counsel. In the night also my heart instructs me. I have set the Lord always before me. Because he is at my right hand, I will not be shaken. Therefore my heart is glad, my whole being rejoices. My flesh also dwells secure. For you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, or let your Holy One see corruption. You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. And then the Message version. Keep me safe, O God. I run my dear life to you. I say to God, be my Lord. Without you, nothing makes sense. And these God-chosen lives all around, what splendid friends they make. Don't just go shopping for a God. Gods are not for sale. I swear I'll never treat God names like brand names. My choice is you, God, first and only. And now I find I'm your choice. You set me up with a house and a yard, and then you make me your heir. The wise counsel God gives when I'm awake is confirmed by my sleeping heart. Day and night I'll stick with God. I've got a good thing going, and I'm not letting go. I'm happy from the inside out, and from the outside in, I'm firmly formed. You canceled my ticket to hell. That's not my destination. And now you've got my feet on the path of life, all radiant from the shining of your face. Ever since you took my hand, I'm on the right way. So interestingly, the psalm, like many prayers, like many psalms, have to do with requests, right? This psalm only has one, and I want to spend some time on verse 1 and 2 because I think that in a lot of ways this is kind of the core of the psalm. So the very first thing they say is just preserve me, God, for in you I take refuge. Another possible translation of that is you are my sanctuary. You'll see in other ones. And this alone is a very fascinating kind of phrase and way of saying things because traditionally in the Old Testament and in religion at the time, the sanctuary was a place, right? It's a temple. It's a place you go to worship and be in God's presence, sure, but we're talking about a place. And so the move there to step aside from the obvious forms of worship, the obvious place that is considered holy, it says, no, that building is not a sanctuary. That building is maybe something that represents it, but God, you yourself are my refuge. You are my safe place. You are my sanctuary. And this kind of thinking is going to be very important, of course, when the actual temple is burned to the ground a couple different times in human history, in biblical times. It's going to be really important when the temple and the system there become more important than finding the God who's supposed to be lurking behind them, right? And so in this psalm, we hear this kind of beautiful reminder that it's in fact God who is our refuge. So no forms of worship, no places, no even, I would say, understandings of what we think God is up to, no theologies. None of those things are ultimate ends. God is our refuge. God is our safe place. And all those things can either lead us to God or they can be ways of getting in the way, as we talked some last week about the religious rules, the religious way of being, which interfered with many of God's people being able to see what God was up to in the world, both when he came among us physically, and it's something we have to be deeply careful of nowadays, that our views, our preferences, our understandings of God don't get in the way of what God is actually up to in the world. Another kind of thing that I think is really important from here is from verse 2. It doesn't say, it says, I say to the Lord, you are my Lord, not the Lord, right? There is a personal claim. There's a possessive word on that has to do with, this is my God, this is my Lord, this is my God, rather than, you are the Lord, you are the God. It's not based on an abstract recognition of power. It is based on ownership, on claiming. And the New Testament's really going to take this in a surprisingly and startling direction, right? When we are called the very children of God, the adopted children of God. I no longer simply call you servants. I no longer call you slaves, but I call you my friends, companions of God himself, beloved children. Lots and lots of different metaphors that, is just saying we can claim God and relationship to God the same way he can claim us. It's a startling way of thinking when back in the day, and nowadays this happens too, gods are claimed because they're powerful. There's many people that go to God because they think he is powerful and is angry, and they're trying to avoid hell. They're trying to avoid bad things happening to us in life. Life is chaotic. We're hoping to have a little bit of insurance, right? But it's not, we worship and we follow God because he's the Lord, because he's the biggest and the baddest and the most powerful. This is our God, and we can claim him as a parent. We can claim him as a friend. It's stuff we're used to, but I think we forget how important and how radical those types of claims actually can be. And I think the key of this entire psalm is this phrase: I have no good apart from you. Or in Eugene Peterson's, without you, nothing makes sense. You are the core of goodness. You are the core of things making sense. And I just think it's one of those biblical statements that we can spend the rest of our lives trying to actually live into, trying to make this actually true. Another great one I've always liked is, the famous Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I don't need anything. I trust what he provides. Again, easy to get our heads around, but to get our heart to that place of, I don't really want anything. I don't need anything more. Or this one, I don't really have any good in the world aside from you. All things that are good and beautiful are, in fact, gifts and expressions from you. And I think claiming this and having this work its way down into our heart of hearts is a project we can spend the rest of our lives trying to grow into, to try and really say in our heart of hearts that this is true. I don't have any goods aside from you. And I don't want us to think that this is like taking it in an aesthetic direction, that all these other things, whether it's things we enjoy in life, things that are beautiful, mountains and friendships, and even just hobbies and things that bring us joy, those are not bad things. And I think sadly that it has been taken that way, sometimes in Christian history, right? Like, to be more spiritual means I don't enjoy anything else. I don't like any of those other things. I think that is a pretty tough sell from the Bible itself. The fact that Jesus didn't really seem to have a lot of use for the aesthetic, when an ascetic is someone who says, I'm more spiritual and hate all these things, right? What was the problem Jesus got in trouble? He hung out with the wrong people. He partied too much. He celebrated too much. He made water into wine so that the celebration continued. What is Jesus constantly doing? He's having feasts with people. He's eating all the time, usually with the wrong people. Now, I understand that a lot of the time people will go in that direction because we can become addicted to comfort. Those things can become ends in themselves, right? Making sure I'm comfortable and get things that I want. The world we live in right now is a deeply unjust world, and a huge chunk of the way economics work in the world right now has to do with making sure certain groups of people can have access to things that make them more comfortable and make them happy, right? So there is some of that stuff, and sometimes we do need to fast. Sometimes we do need to deny ourselves for the sake of others, but it's not because things we enjoy, things that bring us happiness, are bad in of themselves. It's just like many things, they can become out of whack. They can become addictive and gross. We can seek injustice for the sake of continuing our own comforts, etc. But you don't understand who God is and what he is all about unless you recognize God enjoys things. He does want us to enjoy things. He wants to teach us what those things are at. And all of those things are meant to be expressions of his goodness and his love. And so when we're free of those things, if we lose them, we're not broken and heartbroken, right? Because I have no good apart from you. And so they can take away kind of the crutches, the forms from us. We can deny ourselves those things if that's necessary, if we're heading in the wrong direction, or we can enjoy them and recognize good food, companionship, even enjoying things can be expressions of God's love. No good comes apart from God. Ultimately, those things can be expressions of God's goodness, or they can be things that get in the way, but we need to hold them loosely, because the ultimate good is not those things, it's God. God is our ultimate good. We can have no good apart from God's presence and that in our lives. And so I think that, to me, is the core of this psalm. The rest of the psalm, in many ways, is going to be kind of a living out of those things, of different expressions, different quick little reminders. And so, I'll read through this one more time, looking at some of these kind of good, quick reminders of what's here. But that's, to me, the core of this psalm, that you are my Lord, and I have no good apart from you. So as for the saints in the land, they are the excellent ones, in whom is all my delight. Again, it's not just about us and Jesus, right? It's not just about us and God. This is a communal thing. Enjoyments, the goodness of God. There are supposed to be people around us reminding us of that, carrying our burdens together. Living the goodness and the fullness of life in God's presence is a communal activity. Always an important reminder for us as Westerners who are very individualistic. I think verse 4 reminds us that there is another path. There's another way to do that. The sorrows of those who run after another god shall multiply. Their drink offerings of blood I'll not pour out, or take their names on my lips. Just the reminder there's always another path. There are always other things calling for our attention, other things claiming that they know the way to the good life. I like what Eugene Peterson does that. Don't go shopping for a god. Gods are not just another thing on sale. And that's what lurks behind so many other versions of the good life, right? Ultimately, they're just trying to get us to buy something. If I get that one more thing, if I get that one more job, if I go on that one more vacation, if I'm around the right people, then life will be full, life will be good. And yet God says something very differently. That's the point of the psalm, right? No good comes from anything else, any other brand names, any other options, any other shopping around. You are my Lord, and I have no good apart from you. And, biblically, it's a reminder that there's an immense amount of pain involved for us and for the world around us when we don't trust that, when we try some of the other brand names out. We're simply bringing our own sorrows upon our heads. And we can invite people who are following those wrong paths into true fullness, true flourishing, acknowledging why we might be tempted to go in those directions, but that they are ultimately lies and will bring us nothing but sorrows. 5:6, we've got, the Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. You have holden my lot. The lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Indeed, I have a beautiful inheritance. This is, of course, talking about, the promised land. This is a literal, physical place that is expressing God's love in those things. Again, we're not just talking about a spiritual sense of contentedness. We are talking about having places where we are sheltered. We are talking about having people who love us and appreciate us. We're talking about having enough to eat. Things not everybody in the world is gifted with. But we're not talking about just some kind of an internal thing. God's love and God's fullness is expressed in the physical world, in the actual lives we lead. Kind of another reminder, another blessing we get in 7 and 8. I bless the Lord who gives me counsel. In the night also my heart instructs me. I have set the Lord always before me. Because he is at my right hand, I shall not be shaken. Therefore my heart is glad, my whole being rejoices, my flesh also dwells secure. Those verses, I think, are just reminders of, again, God is within us as well. God is blessing us and providing our needs for us, but God is within us. We are not alone to figure out this life. We have the community, as we mentioned earlier, but we have the wisdom and the guidance from the Holy Spirit itself. We do not have to figure out, solve life and its difficulties on our own. Verse 10, for you will not abandon my soul to Sheol or let your Holy One see corruption. A favorite New Testament verse, a reminder that this is, again, not a guarantee, a stamp that things are going to be easy and to go well. We turn to God and look for goodnesses from him because that is not the way of the world. And I think these verses, as they're used in the New Testament, almost always for Jesus, the reminder that even though he goes through the cross, that it does not ultimately win, right? His soul is in Sheol, is in the grave, is in hell, and yet he doesn't see the corruption of it. And that can be read both metaphorically, the hell we often experience in life, or very literally in Jesus' crucifixion and death, right? This is not health and wealth gospel. This is not a promise all things are going to be well. It is a promise that when those things come for Christ himself or his followers, they do not have the ultimate say. It's not about goods and things always being comforts. It's about God being with us through even the darkest of places, and that death and sin and darkness and the way the world is often experienced is not ultimately true. You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy, and at your right hand are pleasures forevermore. So it circles it back around. God's presence across the entire gamut, expressed in all these ways, all goods, all joys, are simply expressions of God's closeness, God's nearest to us in life. And so I just think the question I'm left with is, what does it look like for us to believe this in our heart of hearts, to live a kind of life in which we're the kinds of people who can say and claim this truly? Preserve me, O God, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord, and I have no good apart from you.